Go live, and we are live on the Gamification Revolution. Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Gabe Zickerman. I'm with you today from Tel Aviv, Israel, as part of the G Summit Global Tour, which we'll talk more about in a second. And my guest today, Ryan Mizusaki, coming to us from Delta Airlines in Atlanta. Hello, Ryan.
Hello, Gabe, and everybody else out there.
Hi, all. So excited to have you here, and many of you who are back with us again, welcome back. Those of you who are new to Gamification Revolution, thanks for joining. You'll notice if you're back, a brand new look and feel for Spreecast, the technology that makes this all possible. So hopefully you've had a chance to sort that out, but I want to remind you, you'll need to log in to Spreecast using one of the login methods so that you can chat with us. And then once you're logged in, you can ask questions of me or Ryan by clicking one of the buttons that you see somewhere around you. It'll say camera or question. Ask us a question. We'll answer your questions about gamification and engagement. We can even bring you on camera. If you actually have a camera on your computer, click that camera button. It'll put you in the queue, and Ivan, our producer, will get to you and make sure everything's working, and we'll bring you online. And we'd love to hear from you. And of course, those of you listening to the podcast or watching the video cast after the fact, thank you so much. But of course, you can't ask questions. Feel free to follow up with us on Twitter and join us every Thursday. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm in the middle of G Summit Global, where we're traveling all around the world, doing live workshops and meetups and online education, classes and training and videos and content. It's amazing. I'm going all over the world, powered by so many great airlines. And one of our great speakers as part of G Summit Global is, of course, Ryan Mizusaki, and so he's here with us. And I want to encourage all of you to check that out. It's gsummit.com, and you can sign up, take classes online, watch interesting talks, join us for live Q&A, and then join me live for a hands-on workshop if you are available to do that. Okay, so Ryan, tell me this. What is ReadySetJet?
ReadySetJet is a game that we developed in our learning organization in the reservations division. About a year and a half ago, we were looking at a way to improve the engagement and training for our reservation agents. And traditionally, we've always had games embedded in our learning. You might take the learning piece, and there might be a Jeopardy game or some type of knowledge-based game, but that wasn't always exciting. It became dull and boring for our learners. And so we did some research, and we bought a couple books, including yours, and looked at the ways that we can make our learning more motivating and engaging. And the term gamification, was coming up, and we realized that since games were embedded in learning, why don't we flip it? Why don't we embed learning within a game? So Ready Set Jet is our learning game for the reservations, which allows our learners to learn about cultural awareness, advanced selling, and more job knowledge types of concepts.
So what's the difference between this method and what you were doing before? Like, what were you doing before you decided to build Ready Set Jet? Because you've been training people at Delta for a long time.
Yep. Traditionally, we had trained them in a classroom. So they sit in class as a new hire for about 6 weeks, and they do facilitator-led interactions, and they use the test system to learn about a reservations division and how to do the job. We also blended that with some e-learning where our learners would actually just take page turner type of learning. So you start in the beginning, you learn about your learning objectives, you move forward, and along the way you take some knowledge assessments, and it was pretty linear. And what Ready Set Jet is, it's a completely different environment. There's no pre-prescribed path. You start off at a particular location, and you venture out around the world and travel around the world in the game. And through that journey, you actually learn concepts like a reservation agent might. So one of the things that we also realized from most of our agents is that they don't travel a lot. And so you as a customer, when you're booking and traveling around the world for G Summit Global like you're doing today, you might call reservations and say, I'm going to Tel Aviv. And the agent has never been there before. Now in this game, what we're doing is we're presenting them with a concept that they can actually travel to these destinations, learn about the destinations. So when you call in the next time, they might say, hey Gabe, I understand you're going to Tel Aviv. The airport there is phenomenal. They actually have a sky club there, and you can sit back and during your layover or before the flight, learn about the things about the Sky Club, learn about some local attractions too. So again, it's more interactive. It's not prescribed. Everybody has a completely different experience.
So, I mean, this sounds like a kind of a silly question that I'm going to ask you, right? But is this what's the reason why you think, in your estimation, this is actually a good approach to dealing with this training issue? Like, why is gamification a better approach? And what's the result been with Ready Set Jet?
People like or dislike training because it all depends on the experience that you have. And training, for the most part, is built as a baseline for the average consumer or user, the learner. And what we've embedded in here is various types of games that appeal to different types of people. So one of the first things that we did was we conducted a focus group with our target audience, which is our learners, to understand what type of games they actually like to play. And we found out that some people like the solitaire games. Some people like the social games. A couple of people said, I really like Words with Friends because I can be and interact with another person in another call center without having to be there with them. And some people liked the challenges and just the pure competition of things. So in Ready Set Jet, we don't have a single set and type of game mechanic. We've embedded a lot of different game mechanics inside of it to appeal to the masses, but also through the travel journey and travel experience, they're able to understand and learn the concepts about their job.
Well, you said that some people like training and some people don't like training.
Hmm.
It's hard to find many employees who say like, yeah, I love training. This is amazing.
Yeah.
Do you think there's like a kind of delusion among people who create training materials around that,
Yeah,
that employees actually like it?
Yep. People, for the most part, I don't think that people do like training because, well, let me phrase it this way. They like training from the social aspect because it gets them out of their job and into a classroom where they can interact with
Right,
others. People have, over
right.
the years, have found that e-learning, although it's useful, but it's a solitary experience. And now what we're providing them with is an interactive experience that they can actually socialize on with others. We built into this game a social learning aspect where I can travel to Paris, France, for instance, and leave you a souvenir. Or I can be in a mini game and challenge you to a game. Then you get an email. When you come back and sign on, you're going to see, hey, Ryan was in Paris and he's challenged you to this game. Go to Paris, challenge him, and whoever wins gets all the points and the money. In that game, though, we've embedded some social aspect or some learning aspects to it. So you might learn about, well, actually, for instance, in Amsterdam, you're going to learn about the Anne Frank house. And so through
Right.
that experience, then I'm challenging you to a game in there. We both learn about something, but we're having a social experience, learning experience at the same time. So that's improved the motivation
So
and engagement.
so here's a question, and actually, this is kind of an interesting comment that Beth is making. Hi, Beth, nice to have you back in the chat, which is that training is boring because most trainers are boring. So is some of the secret here that because you are kind of taking away the human trainer and replacing it with a thoughtful, well-designed program that's tailored to the individual, isn't that a big piece of the reason why gamified training is more compelling?
I agree with Beth completely. It is, most trainers use a facilitator guide. So they have this guide from which they're basing most of their topics, and they're injecting their own personality, but sometimes the material itself is kind of boring. What we're allowing our learners to do is take the material and focus on the things that really are important for them. So in Ready Set Jet, you might, like I said, you might travel to Paris, and there's 4 or 5 sites that you have to visit. Each one of those sites within Paris has a different learning component to it and has a different learning engagement model to it. So you, you might find, I'll just put it this way, you might find a maze very compelling within Paris. And as part of that maze, you want to go back and play it more and more. And the more that you play it, the more you learn. So we're allowing the learner to kind of define their own learning path, which that now
And that's, I mean, I think that's very critical.
yeah, they start to own the learning themselves.
So what's been the result from Ready Set Jet? You've talked about a couple of times at G Summit and certainly again at G Summit Global, but what's the upshot of this? How has it worked? What's worked well about it?
We've got a lot of excitement around it, and we've been able to engage our learners now who really are seeing the value of an interactive type of learning environment. It allows them to be more motivated, and by the sheer gamification, they're challenging each other and interacting more. We have 7 call centers around the country and 2 international. Surprisingly enough, our Singapore call center is the most engaged. We've got one person there, Landy Tay, who has scored 40 million points. She's on the top of the leaderboard all the time, and
Wow.
she is engaged with another rep in Cincinnati, and the two of them are competing for the top all the time. Now, yes, they're playing the game, but the more that they play the game, the more that they're learning. And there's so many aspects to the game. I'm sure they probably found out little loopholes where they could score a lot of points, without learning things. But there's always that engaging model for that.
Do you get any pushback from their management or the management team about that being a distraction from their job? Like they should actually be just doing their job, taking calls, and they're playing the game because they're so into it?
That's a great question. The original intent of the game was to provide them with a voluntary experience because games are voluntary and we want them to be motivated to play the game. So the original use case was having a game available for people to use outside of their work. And so they would go home and play the game. But we all know that people have downtime in their jobs, and so because it is a learning experience, we do allow them some time to play the game. And we found that they've been able to balance the use of the playing the game and the excitement around it with actually doing the job. So their performance has not decreased; it's actually increased because now they're more knowledgeable about things like customer service and job knowledge.
So Delta's a pretty innovative organization in general, and certainly right now the company is riding high, big, very successful, great branding, making a lot of money. I think it just did like one of the most admired companies in America made that list, which is rare for an airline. Most people don't like their airlines. Delta certainly in a different category on this one, it feels like these days. Was it difficult to convince people inside Delta, which is nonetheless a big company with a long history of how it trains its people? Was it difficult to convince people to take a flyer on this idea of applying gamification to this concept?
For our division, it was not. We have a fantastic leader, our vice president, Allison, was very supportive of this from day one. And she promoted it and encouraged our management to support it throughout the ranks. We actually had a great partner in Enterprise Rental Car who helped us with some of the funding of the game. So we had a lot of support within our own organization. And then I participated in my role as a general manager of learning, participated on a learning council, which is made up of all the other managers and general managers from the other divisions. And we were able to provide some presentations to them. Since then, our in-flight group, the flight attendants, they're actually in the process of developing and using our framework to roll out their version of the game in late December.
Oh, wow. Is there, so are these like kind of separate? So at Delta, because many of the people who watch the show and are interested in gamification, like you, are champions for the idea inside large organizations with many divisions. Was it important to you guys when you were building it the first time around to do something that was reusable in other divisions, or how did you balance that off against the need to get something done quickly and build a trial and test it out?
That was actually one of the most important things that we wanted to ensure was the reusability of a platform or a framework. Having been participated in e-learning for the last 20 years and content management in general, reusability is key. I used to be an old director developer, and nothing was worse than building timelines and then coming back on and building actions. No, it wasn't action scripting language, and then having to come back for the next program and rebuild it all again. So reusability was key for me. And so when we were looking for vendors, we came to them and said we wanted to develop a game platform which allowed us to reuse mini games and reuse the platform for the expandability and scalability, whether we wanted new content or we wanted to expand the content to other divisions.
So that was part of the equation.
Absolutely.
You know, um, it's one of the questions that gets asked a lot, and Nikita's asking it here, which is about persuading people who are reluctant to accept gamification as a strategy. And I think, it sounds like you didn't have that much pushback, but I'm curious if you can share some of your insight now, having gone through a full cycle, of course, delivered this thing, it's successful, it's, a win. Can you share your insight for folks that maybe are in an environment where it's more challenging about how you'd go about it if you had to do it over again to convince management or peers that applying gamification to training or learning is a good idea?
Well, what I talked about originally, which was we have games embedded in learning today. Even in your classroom experience, you've got the Jeopardy games, you've got flashcards, you've got other types of devices and games that are embedded in the learning experience. By using and flipping it around and saying that, we're doing the same thing, but instead of having a game in the learning, we're going to have learning embedded in a game. That helped people understand things. And then the other part that was hard for our design team, which is instructional designers who build instruction, they weren't used to the theory of game mechanics. So we came up with this theme called play to learn. How are we going to learn about designing for games? And I said, just play to learn. And so I had my designers go out and play Risk, card games, solitaire, World of Warcraft, any games. I said, when you're playing these games, I want you to play and have fun, but at the same time, write down the types of emotions that you're feeling and what excites you about these games. Is it the challenge of beating your little brother? Is it the social interaction that you're just getting together with a bunch of friends playing mahjong? Is it just the thinking part of the game? And what are the things that are critical to you as a user that you can bring forth into the design of the game? And then we extended that out and we really marketed our game very well. We had a conference where we bring our leaders into for a 2-day conference, and we marketed it. So in our game, we have characters that our vendor helped provide, and we created cutouts. So we had 6-foot cutouts that you could take pictures
Oh, like
with.
live cutouts?
Yes. And so you could
Okay,
take pictures with them, and
cool.
we sent them to all the call centers. And we generated what we called a game day. So when the game was released on October 1st of 2012, we had a worldwide game day where people could play the game, come into a training room, experiment with it, see how it functioned, take pictures with the cutout. We actually created a couple of movie trailers. So, there's a lot of game trailers that are out there, and so we created our own game trailer.
So it sounds like you're actually very thoughtful. I mean, it's no surprise, of course, Ryan, anyone who knows you, but it's very thoughtfully, you actually were you almost gamified the process of convincing the internal people to buy off on gamification, and then actually like made sure that you had your marketing piece in place, almost like a consumer product.
Absolutely.
There's a there's a I even sort of commented some discussion in the online discussion here that this insight of yours that pointing out to people that there are a lot more games being played around them anyway,
Hmm.
that this isn't actually something as transformative as they might think, it's not as shockingly different as what we're already doing, is sort of an interesting strategy. Do you think that the success of Ready Set Jet, obviously you've talked about the flight attendants wanting to do stuff. Do you think the success of Ready Set Jet would um, convince people to think about gamification in an even deeper way in learning and training? Because here we're talking about training people on facts related to their job and being better at selling. What about things like leadership and other non-tangible or non-factually oriented
Yeah,
training kinds of things? Is there any potential for it?
there actually is. At Delta Airlines right now, we have a leadership program, and our HR organization is working with a vendor where it's actually a board game. And I haven't played it yet, but I've talked to some folks. It's a board game about leadership, and then there's another board game about finances. So similar to Monopoly, you learn about how we run things at the airlines through the financial aspect of things, and you're playing a board game where you have to buy planes or sell planes and sell routes and that kind of stuff. So they actually have gamified it at another level too.
Fascinating. So, more tactical question here from Michael Finney. He wonders what kind of play testing was done. And for those of you who don't know what that means, the question is, how did you actually, while you were developing the game, how did you actually test that the game elements of it were compelling and that they worked? How did you make sure that people were really into it, that they achieved flow and things were balanced? Can you tell us more about that?
So the game has kind of two levels of structure and interactivity. After our focus groups, we realized that if they were going to play a game on their own, they actually did want to learn about travel because we're in the travel industry. So the first game at the highest level, the game component is you start off at an airport and you travel to, let's say, from Atlanta to Minneapolis or Atlanta to Narita. So there's that travel aspect and game aspect of travel. But then when you land, you have these mini games that I've mentioned. And those mini games are really similar games to the games you find online. There's a game that's similar to Bejeweled. There's a game that's similar to a maze. There's a game that's similar to where you drop things down, or things drop down and you have to catch them. There's word games. So they're based on concepts that exist today. We didn't come up with really anything new, but we just added a variety and brought them all together so that people had the ability to choose different types of games that they wanted to play and find valuable. So, but what we did do in terms of play testing is we created prototypes of these that we could play and walk through in a scenario before they were actually coded. So we had almost a similar board game that was a sketch of the game and said, you're going to fly from here to here, and then when you land here in a city, here's the types of games that you can play. So that's how we kind of tested it out first.
And did you, because how many agents are touched by ReadySetJet?
About 5,000.
Okay, so did you grab a subset of that 5,000, like pull a team of people aside and say, okay, you're our special beta testers and you're going to get to play with it, or did you just dump it on everyone at
No,
once?
we did. We did. Definitely pulled some people, both people who said, I don't want to play a game at all, to people who are gamers, and got them together and kind of alpha tested it with them.
And did you put any did you put any specific sort of constraint on what would happen when people went from the alpha to the real thing? Like, did you tell them, like, don't tell anybody that we're doing this, and everything that we do here is going to be wiped out when you start the real thing?
No, we didn't, unfortunately.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Um, so Ben asks, and thanks for that question. It's always interesting to talk the details because details are really meaningful. So Ben's asking about stats around adoption. And I know you've thrown some really interesting ones around before. What can you tell us about the actual adoption of ReadySetJet or the outcomes?
absolutely. Like I said, we implemented October 1st of 2012. Within the first month, uh, 2,500 people had registered and visited at least one city. And then also, within the first year now, we just ran some statistics. I'm looking at my notes here. Um, we have out of the 5,000 people who can play, 4,800 have registered and are playing. We have the concept of travel miles within the game and travel time. And so far, our players have traveled 270 million miles within the game, and they've played
Wow.
or have the equivalent of 103 years of flight time, continuous flight time. So, and they've also issued 8,000 challenges to other players. So the adoption has been pretty good, and I think over 25% of the people have scored over 2 million travel points.
So, you mentioned earlier, so this is very all like super interesting. You sort of mentioned earlier, you're like, and you sort of drove right past something I actually think is very significant. You said, we believe that training should be optional and blah, blah, blah. And actually, many companies don't treat training as a kind of optional process. They don't design their training programs to be craveable and desirable, and certainly not as fun or engaging as what it is that you built with ReadySetJet. What can you say about that tension between those two things, and how do you resolve them in the context of thinking about, gamifying it?
Yeah, the reason why we made it optional at first, I should say, is because we wanted there to be a certain amount of excitement around it. And, you know, we know that time to train there's always a cost associated with that. So we figured if we can get people to voluntarily play the game and learn at the same time and hunger for it more, then we'd be able to embed it within our actual learning experience. And once that I forgot to mention is after the first 6 months, we started having new hire classes again, and we had our management saying, "Well, why don't you have them play the game now? Rather than say eliminate it or keep them from playing it." More of our managers out of the call center said, "I really liked how you did this. if you could put this into the new hire experience and actually have them spend time doing that, then they would learn more about it. So it's now been adopted into our new hire experience. And the plan was,
So now it's,
yes,
yeah.
yeah, the plan was to be a
So
voluntary
now it's
first,
not
so that
optional.
they would introduce it, so that it's not optional.
Now it's not optional. It's interesting because, and thanks for that question, Ben, by the way. And of course, Beth in chat talking about, can it be engaging and also not optional? Can it be compulsory and engaging? Do you think that have you noticed any difference as it's become compulsory in terms of people's engagement with it? Is there anything qualitative or quantitative that you can say about that?
Yeah, the interesting stat for our agents is that I would say about 50 to 60% of our agents are females between the ages of 35 and 55. We didn't think that they were gamers. And when we did our focus groups, they were kind of shy about saying that they're gamers. But then when we asked the question, well, do you play games? And we're not talking about online games, but do you play games with your kids? Do you play cards with them or gin with your friends? They kind of started to open up. But our new hires are primarily between the ages of 18 and 23, and they're definitely gamers. So when they see that now this game is available for them in the new hire experience, they're asking for more types of games. So it's given us the opportunity to introduce it to, I won't say our older audience, but the audience who's been there for a while and worked with us for a while, but also our new hire audience now has the ability to provide us with feedback on, well, if you had this kind of game, this would be really good for us, and this is how we learn. Because in the past, our new hires would come and they make their own flashcards about this various city codes, Minneapolis being MSP, Cincinnati being CDG.
Right.
And so now they have the opportunity to go into the game and see that.
Out of curiosity, are there differences between the older and younger audiences beyond just this, like, their view of gamers? Because we get asked this question all the time. How is gamification different, when we're dealing with older or younger? Is it just perception or the actual play differences in what you've got to deliver?
Um, we haven't done a lot of review on that yet, but we do know that a lot of people are using the game, even of the latter target group. So it's hard to say. We haven't done an analysis to see if that target audience and how it's changed their interest in it. But I do know that the younger set is appearing to play the game more often. And actually, the
Fascinating.
Singapore group too plays a lot, and they're looking for the mobile devices because right now it's a desktop Flash-based app. We're in the process of releasing a tablet version later this year because there was such enormous amount of feedback that said we really want to play on a mobile device.
So there's a follow-up question from Ben, which I think is really interesting, which is this question of how the challenge modality that you talked about, being able to send a challenge to a colleague and say, I challenge you to this in ReadySetJet, how has that affected adoption and retention? Who really does that, and what does it achieve?
Yeah, there's two ways to send and issue challenges. With our audience, our youth, our agents, they've actually traveled around the system a little bit. So you might have an agent who started off in Minneapolis and now resides in Tampa, and that person had a lot of friends in Minneapolis, and so if you know the person's email address, you can issue a challenge to that person. I could just say, ryan.mizusaki@delta.com, and I issue the challenge. But you also have the option to issue a challenge to just anybody who's registered. By hitting random person, it'll just come up with a random name. And so some people have actually challenged people who they don't even know and built some relationships
Oh,
there. And then the interesting part is that a lot of people are issuing challenges to our vice president. So they want to make a connection with
oh,
her.
really?
Yes. So she came to me the other day and said, "Hey, I'm getting all these challenges. How do I don't have the time to do it. Can you help me figure out a way to respond to all these challenges to make sure that we still retain that engagement level?"
How funny. I've had this one last kind of thing to exit on from Nikita, which was why not let the public play Ready, Set, Jet? And I seem to recall that there was a URL that actually was accessible at one time. I remember when I first saw it, that you could kind of go to and see various parts of it. Any plans to turn Ready, Set, Jet into beyond training Delta employees, training Delta customers?
We've talked about that. It would be a great marketing opportunity, not necessarily marketing of Delta Airlines, but marketing of the routes that we fly and better educating our passengers on really the flying experience. Because if you as a passenger knew that certain markets, it's harder to take pets to those markets, let's say, then, and you knew about the pet embargoes or pet situations, or how as a traveler, if you're traveling with the unaccompanied minor, then the better educated that you as a consumer are, the better experience that you're going to have when those expectations when you actually get to the airport. So we've talked about it. We're still kind of trying to figure out if it's a good opportunity, if it makes sense, but it's definitely something that we're looking at.
I can't wait to see it. Ryan Mizusaki from Delta, thank you so much. Folks you can follow Ryan at on Twitter at RJMizu. Thanks for being here,
You're
Ryan.
quite welcome.
And if you want to hear Ryan give an amazing lecture on the subject, to join me or join me for a live workshop, you can sign up at gsummit.com and be part of our G Summit global event this winter, where we're traveling all around the world. Maybe if we had a ReadySetJet for G Summit, we could bring everybody with us and everyone would know the amazing things about the cities where we're going, hopefully for next year. In the meantime, everyone, thanks for joining us today on the Gamification Revolution. I'm your host, Gabe Zuckerman. You can follow me at gzuckerm. And we'll be back here again next week with another great talk on the subject of engaging your employees and customers. In the meantime, till we see you again, everyone have fun.
Thank
Take
you.
care.